A psychologist published a report in 1927 which was initially prompted by someone noticing that a waiter could recall in detail orders which were still outstanding, but they were less able to recall details once those orders had been completed and paid for. The result is what's now known as the Zeigarnik effect, after Lithuanian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, who wrote the original report. What's actually going on to create this effect? Well, the first thing to say is the effect is actually real. Bluma Zeigarnik originally tested 164 individuals and then two medium-sized group experiments. And the results of these tests and experiments have been replicated in later studies. In her report on finished and unfinished tasks, it appears that if the task is unfinished, then the brain has a better chance of recalling the details than if the task has been completed. Now, the brain has two primary ways of storing information, what's known as the long-term memory and the working memory. It's thought that the memories were initially stored in the working memory, later archived into long-term memory. However, it appears instead that the brain makes two copies, one of which is put into the working memory and the other copy is put into the long-term memory. This, of course, is an oversimplification of actually what's going on, but this double copying can have a substantial impact on memory recall when it comes to an unfinished task. With long-term memory, which is formed at the same time as the working memory, it remains virtually dormant whilst the working memory, the same information, is actually active. However, once the working memory of the event or task is no longer active, then the long-term memory can become active if those memories are needed. If, however, those memories are not accessed, then the path of those memories becomes less pronounced, and the details of the memory start to fade. Now, with an incomplete task, the information is still being retained in the working memory, so the person believes that the information relating to the task will need to be updated and processed in the near future. Once the task has been completed, the copy in the working memory is no longer required, and the information is no longer accessed whilst it's in the long-term memory. That pathway for the information begins to fade. The whole result of this, the brain believes that the task is unfinished. It's easier to recall the information in those memories than for the task that's complete, unless that finished task memory is constantly being accessed in the long-term memory. Now, other than waiters being able to remember the orders of people who have yet to pay for this bill, this Zeigarnik effect does actually have some practical implications when it comes to memory and retrieving information. Now, the best way to be certain of recalling information is to be able to access it from the long-term memory store. In order to access this information, the more familiar the brain is with the pathway to the information, the more likely it will be able to remember the information at the end of the path. For students, this means that those who repeatedly revise or study the major points of a particular topic stand a better chance of being able to recall it than if they just go over the topic just once and moving on to something else. However, if that same student is trying to cram for an exam, they can make use of this unfinished memory task. Now, the working part of the memory of the brain will use that unfinished task to actually store the memory. So you can, instead of focusing on a single topic or a subject and completely studying that subject, you can use brief periods of study on one topic before moving on to another. Not only can this prevent the brain from becoming bored by studying the same thing over and over again, but by tricking the brain into thinking that each of the topics has been incompletely studied and be shortly going back to complete the study on that topic, can maximise the potential of the working memory in order to be able to recall the information for an exam.